we're going to look at a little bit of blind versus blind action in this hand. I've got 6-5 of diamonds, and it's going to fold to me in the small blind. I'm going to raise quite a wide range here, and I get called. My range is going to be the top 40-some% of hands. My opponent's range is probably going to be 40-ish something percent of hands, maybe 50% of hands, 60% of hands, but it's going to be capped, right? They're not going to have aces, kings, ace, king, stuff like that. Capped, decapitated, castrated, if you will, as in they will not have any nuts. I will have lots of nuts on this board, particularly, right? Just looking at the board, it's a beautiful board for the last aggressor, for the pre-flop raiser. I've got 16 combos of ace king, which are the nuts right now. They shouldn't have any ace king at all. I've got 16 combos of king 9. They've got like 12 or 16. Maybe they 3-bet king 9 suited some, but they're going to have a lot of king 9 as well. And then 9-8, I'm going to have 16 combos of that. So I've got 48 clean straights, right? And my opponent might 3-bet 9-8 suited some of the time also. So I'm going to say I probably got about twice as many straights in my range, and their range might have more total combos in it than mine does. So I'm going to have at least double the concentration of straights that they do. And I'm going to have all the nut straights. They're going to have none of the nut straights. To make matters worse for my opponent, I'm going to have all the sets, queens, jacks, tens. My opponent will have either none of those or fewer of those than I do. Hands like queen jack suited, jack 10 suited, also I'm going to have all those combos. They're probably not going to have much of those, or they can, but they're going to 3-bet some of them pre. All the 2-pair combos, I think they can have like queen jack off, queen 10 off, jack 10 off. I can have those as well. And pocket aces, pocket kings, not as big a factor here, but still, you know, hands that are good that are going to be in my range and not in their range, in theory, right? I do have this player with the fish bones because they open limped at some point. I think that was after this hand. So at this point, they were just an unknown. So I think it's very clear that I want to bet this flop very often, perhaps with range, and that maybe I can use some large sizings, right? Because that nuttiness advantage really entitles us to put more money in the pot, put a lot of pressure on an opponent's range. So I go ahead and bet about 3/4 pot, which is certainly on the larger size of sizings. And my opponent makes the call. I think this sizing makes some sense. We'll break it down a little bit more later when we get into the solvers. But for now, let's take a look at the turn. Total brick, right? The 7, like I guess hands like 10-7, jack 7, queen 7 made 2-pair. They can't be feeling super hot about it. You know, an ace, a king, a 9, an 8, or a diamond all were very significant cards that change what the nuts are, or not change the nuts, right? Ace, king, 9, 8, but change the composition of like how many straights each player has. And of course, diamond changes the nuts, as well as all the board pairing cards. So this is one of a fairly small number of blanks in the deck. Basically like 7s through deuces that aren't diamonds. And this isn't a heart either, so it doesn't add a second straight draw, or a second flush draw. Plenty of straight draws out there to go with the straights. So I'm definitely going to bet again. The question is how big. I mean, I could check. Sometimes I guess I could go for a check raise. But I go with a somewhat large sizing, right about pot. And my opponent calls again. I think that sizing makes sense. Again, I've got a lot of really nutty hands in my range, so I think I get to use big sizings. And then the river's a break, and I have absolutely nothing. I have 6 high. And once upon a time, there was this idea that you just always bluff with the bottom of your range, right? And this has to be the bottom of my range. Like, maybe I can have 5-3 of diamonds or 6-3 of diamonds, right? But it's really hard to have a worse hand than this. So that mentality is like, bet. And on top of that, I know that I have all these nuts. I have all this ace king in my range. So I'm like, yeah, I get to bet. And even like jamming here might make some sense, right? With a large portion of my range. But let's take a step back before I bet and think like, is this the best combo to be betting with? Yes, it's 6 high. Anything they fold like 9-6. That's a win. So I guess like I could even like put like $1.50 in the pot and be like, yeah, let's see if they'll fold king deuce. Let's see if they'll fold 9-6. There's not a lot of 9s that that don't have a pair, right? But the truth of the matter is we really want to, on the river, be thinking about what we're blocking, right? And here, if you look at a 6 and a 5, they're both diamonds. So I'm blocking hands like king 5 of diamonds, 9-6 of diamonds, any diamond with a 6 or a 5 in it, I'm blocking it. Jack 6, Jack 5 of diamonds, stuff like that, right? And those are hands that I want to be targeting. I want to get them to fold diamonds if I have nothing, right? So with 6 high, I want to be getting diamonds to fold. So if I had somehow 6-5 of hearts or something like that, I think that would actually probably make a better bluff here. On top of that, I'm not blocking king 9. I'm not blocking 9-8. So there's slow played straights my opponent could have. I'm not blocking really any reasonable like queen x, jack x, 10x. Yeah, like queen 5 offsuit, queen 6 offsuit I'm blocking, I guess. You know, jack 6 of diamonds and jack 5 of diamonds. And those maybe I could get them to fold. Actually, that's even working against my argument. So the point is, this combo is not a good bluff. A combo like king deuce, right? King 8 would be a good bluff. You know, 9, if I want to be bluffing diamonds, having like a 9 of diamonds would probably be better than like a 6-5 of diamonds. But mostly I think my bluffs here want to have a king, a 9, an 8. 9's a really good card. And as a result, I think I should probably just give up with this hand, right? It's okay. Sometimes you just give up. Sometimes it's just not the hand to bluff with. But I put the bet in and they called. And what did they have? They had king queen with the king of diamonds. You know, they probably don't love having the king of diamonds because now they're blocking like king deuce of diamonds, some hands that would be very attractive barrels to me to some extent. But they're blocking ace king, they're blocking king 9, and they have top pair and a decent kicker. So I think they played the hand well. I think I played the first 2 streets fine, and then after that it gets a little questionable. So let's take a look at ranges, and then we'll look at a couple of solves that I did. So here's the ranges I used. On the bottom is my range. The other player's range is on top. I don't know why I have it that way. It's from before. 43% range roughly for me. I think this is probably about what I'm doing this with. And at the top, that's about what I think a reasonable player will probably have. A reasonable player showing, you know, king 9 and 9-8 suited aren't going to be there so much because they're going to get 3-bet. King 9 off, 9-8 off are going to be there represented full. Yes, this player might have actually had significantly more combos in this range. They might have 3-bet fewer and called with more, right? So they could have had a much wider range. That's, you know, that's something to consider, and we can worry about that type of stuff at another time. For now, I kind of want to think like, how would I play this against a random opponent who I think is playing reasonably? Against a less reasonable player, I think to some extent we don't have to stress it as much, right? We want to go a little bit more exploitative, and this is probably going to be more useful more often. Also, if I give him a wider range, it's going to be a really, really, really big sim. And this one started off quite large, but then I narrowed it down a bit. So let's take a look at, I've got a little spreadsheet that's going to show a few of the sims that I ran. Okay, so I ran 3 sims. As you can see, this isn't all super polished, but I think the information is still going to be useful. Also, it still says big hearts in No Limit Hold'em. And these are small diamonds. Big hearts, maybe big heart, you know, big, anyway. So here we've got 3 sims. I ran the first one and gave 3 options: third pot, 3/4 pot, and bet 150% of pot. And it wanted me to bet 81.94% of the time, so like 82% of the time. In position, fold to these different bet sizes, about 25%, about 43.5% to the 2 first sizes. It mixes with the 33 and the 75%. It didn't use the overbet that much, and it checked like 18% of the time, right? As you can see, my EV is 154, which is $1.54 basically. Their EV is 82.88, which is 82 cents or 83 cents. The pot overall was 237, right? So cents, right? We're going with cents. So we'll call them chips. That's about, the 154 is about 65% of the pot. So my EV, I'm going to realize about 65% of the pot in terms of in expected value. However, my equity is only 57.5. And the reason I'm going to over realize is I've got this huge nuttiness advantage. I have a big range advantage, right? Even forgetting just the nuttiness, 57% equity is a lot. So given that, and you know, that's against the more kind of accurate range for what they could be playing. If they're playing a bigger range, maybe my equity advantage is even bigger. Maybe it's similar because they've got more good hands and more bad hands. I don't know. Anyway, if we look at the second sim, I basically forced myself to bet third pot, which is a strategy people use sometimes, right? It's just like, we're always going to bet third pot. And they're only supposed to fold 19.5% against that. So if we do that really small sizing, I think a lot of opponents are going to overfold, right? A lot of opponents are going to fold too many hands. There are going to be a lot of hands that are pretty easy to find a way to peel with there, but I think there might be some like 8x. We'll take a look at how they're supposed to respond to this to try and get a sense of like, do people do this properly? But I think it's a little bit tricky, right? So you can see my EV went down to 152.54. So that's less than 2 chips off, right? And since the pot is only 237 chips, that's less than 2% of the pot that I'm dropping in terms of EV. Not even considering that my opponent might play poorly against this strategy. Therefore, I think we can simplify to this strategy. However, I looked at another strategy, which is bet 3/4 of pot 100% of the time. And here you can see they're actually supposed to fold 36% of the time, which I think they probably will. They might even overfold against this as well, as it's a larger bet size. It's going to be a little harder for them to peel, like emotionally, because they're like parting with more chips, right? But the EV is almost identical. It's like 0.25 chips different, so that's negligible, right? That's like 0.1% or 1,000th of the pot. That sounds right. And of course their EV, goes with my EV. So let's take a look at some of the sims and just understand that any of these strategies look like they would work, right? What we don't want to do is be checking like 50% of the time. I guess I could node lock for that. I'm not going to do that. Every time I run some sims and I do a video and I'm like, I guess I could have done this other sim. There's always 1,000 sims we could do, right? There's just infinite ones that we could change this, change that, change that. I do think running a couple different sims for each situation can be very valuable. Here we can see that I can bet third, I can bet 3/4, or I can mix. And it's all fine, right? As long as I'm using good frequencies with those. And in fact, I wouldn't be surprised if bet 75, but bet it like 80% of the time, 85% of the time, something like that, yields an EV closer to this 154. So that might be our best strategy. Just give up with some real trash hands and bet 3/4 pot with everything else. So let's look at some sims. First thing I want to do is take a look at what happens if I choose the bet sizing I chose with my whole range, right? So if I just go ahead and bet 3/4 pot with range, how are they supposed to respond? They're supposed to raise very little. It looks like almost always with a king. Let's see, are these with diamonds? Some with diamonds. Some hands like king deuce, they'd rather not have diamonds. Okay. Hands like king 9 are going to raise a fair amount. 9/8 is just calling, we can see. And all of these under pairs are folding. So those are hands that just can't continue, right? So with our like ace deuce hands, we get pocket 3s, 4s, 5s, 6s, 7s to fold. 8s, I imagine, without a diamond are going to fold. Yes, so they can peel if they have a diamond. They have backdoor flush draw to go with it. A lot of ace X, right? Ace X without a diamond, without the ace of diamonds even, right? Even just like a 7 of diamonds isn't very happy. These hands are all folding, right? So if we have a hand like king 4 of spades even, right? Betting that is getting a lot of better hands to fold. They're supposed to fold 9/7 off, which is interesting. I think a lot of people would actually continue with that hand perhaps, but they're supposed to raise a little bit of it if they have a diamond. And then some 10x is actually folding. So they're actually folding a good number of pairs. This is against the larger sizing, right? So do we think, one thing when we run a sim is to think like, will people play well against this strategy? Right? If they do, the strategy's fine. It's still balanced and we're not going to get exploited. But if they play particularly poorly against one balanced strategy, then we should prefer the one that they play poorly against, because then we gain a bunch of EV, right? We're not just playing something balanced and kind of breaking even against them. We're actually gaining. These 9x suiteds, I imagine that's going to be with diamonds and hearts, of course. They're folding. Yeah, so they're folding a good number of straight draws as well. And like king 5 suited, they're even folding a little bit of, not a lot, but just a little. So if they continued like every king, that's probably okay. Yeah, and so they're raising very little, as we talked about. And then let's say they call, right, which they did. And then it turns the 7 of clubs. Now you can look at my betting range, and it actually almost never wants this... the pot is 593. This sizing that's slightly larger than pot, this 652, it like almost never wants to use this sizing here. if we look at 6-5 of diamonds, it always wants to bet this hand. It mostly wants to go like pot and a half, right? So on the turn, I could have gone even bigger, would have been better. And so if we look at what happens if I use the bet sizing I chose, which we'll do in a moment, we're not going to get a great representation because I'm supposed to do that so infrequently. It's going to be this very small number of cases, right? But as you can see, because I still have this very nutty range, I get to use this large sizing pretty frequently, 20% of the time. Having said that, you know, I can bet small a little bit as well. Hands like pocket aces, pocket kings, king, queen, ace, queen. These like good one pair hands, but still one pair. And then some of these like jack X hands, I guess those are sort of semi-bluffing. I don't even know. A little bit of like king X that, you know, is of spades or clubs or whatever, doesn't have a flush draw. Those can do that. But mostly I'm checking. I'm checking 62% of my range because I bet so big, so wide on the flop, right? I just can't sustain that amount of aggression with my whole range. I can use it with a good amount of my range, but not my whole range. So let's see what happens briefly if I do what I did and then they call. First, let's look at their strategy. Again, they're barely raising. Jack sevens, like a raise. King nine, now they're springing the trap a little bit. But they're folding tons. They're folding 47%. So that makes, you know, this bet sizing fairly attractive. This is actually above the minimum defense frequency, right? Because I bet more than pot. So I'm not really gaining automatically by them folding. They're folding a lot of queen X here on the turn to this bet size, right? So this is a thing when we're doing solves also, is to kind of like store these things. Like, yeah, in this hand I was out of position, but because I'm using a range that's reasonable for the in-position player, I can also learn, okay, if someone goes 3/4 and then pot, I can fold a queen, you know, just like a garbage queen, I can call once and fold. And then on the river, maybe they're going to fold some queen seven, some queen eight, right? And we kind of learn where those thresholds are against different activities, or different actions, so we can improve like both sides of the scenario. I think it's very efficient. So I like to do that when possible. So let's say that they call, you know, and they're just not raising, right? They're folding a lot of junk and some decent hands, but they do call, and then a 4 of clubs comes. Let's take a look at 6-5, and it's just a pure check. I mean, 99% of the time, it's checking, right? So a bet here is just misguided. And I think it's because I'm not blocking anything, except for diamond draws, which I want them to fold, right? Like ace 6 of diamonds, if they have that, or king 6 of diamonds, or whatever. A lot of those hands have bluffed already for them. Not a lot, right? Because they weren't doing that much raising. So this just isn't the hand to bluff. If we look like, yeah, king 9, that's just jamming, just shoving, you know, 2 and change pot, 2.5x pot into like 1900, right? And $19. We're just shoving 40 something dollars in with king 9. But ace 9 is doing it as well, right? Ace 9 is a very good bluff there. It's blocking, you know, ace X on the board and 9-8 and king 9. And in case they slow played ace king, like in case they have any ace king there, like it's nice also to have an ace. Why not? So a bunch of king X, like king 8, right? So king 9 is betting for value. King 8 is bluffing. And then these weaker kings are actually folding. King 8 blocks king 9 and 9-8, right? So that's one of the reasons it's such a premium bluff. 9-8 is just jamming, and if you run into king 9, you run into king 9. And that's basically like a lot of what you're betting. You know, sets are jamming as well, which I think is something that a lot of people might not think about, right? That we're jamming like 7-7. We're not really going to have 4-4 here, but if we do, we jam. 10s we're jamming. Queens and jacks are checking a fair amount, and that's because it's harder to get value from a set when you're blocking top pair, top 2 pair, that kind of stuff, right? So if we check with those hands and then say our opponent were to jam, now we're snapping with queens and with jacks, you know, in solver land. In reality, you know, we're probably thinking about it like, like, is this person ever bluffing here? But against a good player who's going to have the appropriate bluffs, absolutely, they should be, right? What are their bluffs? Their bluffs are going to be similar, right? King 8, ace 9, 9-6, 9-4, 9-5, that kind of stuff, right? They're, you know, betting large with 9-8 and king 9, basically. And sometimes they use small bets so that they can value bet a hand like queen 7. Let's take a look if we jam Like a hand like Queen 7 is actually this crying call. Oh, that's 2 pair. Right, of course. So Queen 7, that's not a crying call. I mean, it is actually 2 pair, they're folding some, right? But Queen 8 off, snap fold, Queen 9 off, suited rather, whatever. Suited or not suited, it doesn't matter. But Queen 9, Queen 8 are mostly folding. You know, a hand like Queen 10 is very uncomfortable here. It's mixing. And so this, if we look at this, it's like, this is a hard strategy to figure out, right? For the opponent. It's hard for them to figure out how to actually execute this. If we go back to the 7 and say, what if I use that larger sizing? What if I use the big sizing? Well, now they're folding a ton. They're raising almost never. And then when they call and the river's like a 4, my 6-5 is not bluffing, right? I think one interesting thing, though, is if we go back to this 4 and make it like a 9, now my 6-5 is mostly bluffing, right? We're mostly bluffing with our 6-5 because it's scary. There's something we can represent. We can get more pair hands to fold. And yeah, and we also run out of bluffs a little bit, right? Because so many of our bluffs just made hands. Let's take a look at what happens if I have a choice of bet sizes, right? So I've actually chosen this size. First of all, is 6-5 still good with this size? Yes, 6-5 of diamonds prefers this size. In fact, if it has a choice, it likes this size. What kind of hands like smaller sizes? Hands like Jack 7, a lot of hands that don't have diamonds, maybe less robust equity. Overall, if you look at this strategy, this is when I look at a strategy and go, I don't think I really want to mix, because it's not like there's hands that are just clearly one and other hands that are clearly another. It's all this kind of wavy, like some of this, a little bit more of that. And this is a very difficult strategy to execute. So I think the way to go would probably be just bet 3/4 pot with all of your hands that aren't like 7-5 offsuit with no backdoor, right? These under things, you just check them and check like a little bit of like Jack X, maybe the occasional Queen X, and like King 10, Ace 10, those make sense as checks, right? We've got a pair and we've got a straight draw and we're blocking, you know, a hand like King 10 is blocking some straights. So I think it's a nice hand to induce, particularly, I guess it doesn't matter if it has diamonds. It kind of prefers not to have a diamond, and that makes some sense to be played passively, right? But if you just wanted to bet this 3/4 pot with range or bet half pot with range, that's probably fine too. You know, as we saw, there's just not that big a difference. And sometimes we're going to look and there is going to be a big difference. Then we say, oh, we have to do this, right? We can't do that other thing. We lose way too much value that way. But sometimes we're going to say, oh, there's not that big a difference. Let's go with something that's simple to execute. So if we go 3/4 pot again, you see they're folding pretty wide. I think they're folding more now. They are. And I can't quite figure out why that is against, you know, I guess this strategy is just a little more effective, so it's trickier to play against, so they have to fold more. I'm not super confident that. Oh, no, I got it. Of course, it makes total sense. Maybe you already figured it out. We're checking a bunch of hands, right? We're checking a bunch of garbage mostly, and then some kind of medium hands. Because of that, the range that we do bet is stronger than it would have been otherwise. The range that we bet 3/4 is stronger than the 3/4 range. The range that we bet third is stronger than the pure third range, right? Because we have 18% of hands that were like, yeah, I'm not going to put this in my bet range. So of course they're going to fold more. That makes all the sense. So again, they're not raising very much, just a little bit of King 9. They're not even raising 9-8 at all to speak of. So let's say they call, and then the turn is that 7 of clubs. Again, let's look at the 6-5 of diamonds. Yes, we're still supposed to use this overbet sizing, right? And not just a little bit, like 150% a pot. And maybe you would like an even bigger size. I don't know, maybe 2x. But let's go with the sizing we did go with and say they call, because again, they do very little raising, basically just the Jack 7 that hit a second pair here and is a little vulnerable, right, to getting counterfeited. And a 4 of clubs comes on the river. And again, we're supposed to check a lot. However, you'll see now we get to bet 27% of the time with this jam, right? We get to jam over a quarter of the time. Before it was less than a fifth of the time, I believe. It was like 19 something. So because we've selectively removed a few hands from our range, the range that we get here with is stronger. so we get to apply even more pressure with it. And maybe that's one reason for just checking a few just give ups, right? But whenever our C bet percentage is over like 80%, I think we can round up to 100. But if we do selectively drop off those just the right ones, I think that buys us a little bit more aggression on later streets. So, to each their own. But again, 6-5 of diamonds, that's just not the hand to bluff with. And I think that's pretty much it. Yeah. I've got the other sim that shows third pot. Let's take a look at that. Let's take a look at it. Once more into the sim. Now I'm betting third pot. If we look at their range, they're only folding about 80%. I mean, sorry, they're continuing about 80%. They're only folding about 20%, and they're raising almost never now. Basically, I'm putting a little bit of money, and they're like, okay, let's just get to the turn, and they're just shedding just these absolute total trash from their range. Obviously, the only hands with a diamond that are folding are like 8, 7, 6, and 5x, right? And without a diamond, they're folding some like ace 5, whatever, but they're peeling some of that. So if we think about it, it's like, are they peeling all their like ace 3 of clubs? I don't know. I think they might fold some of that. So, they might overfold to this, but probably not that much. So let's say they call and the turn is a 7 of clubs. And now we look, and in this scenario, I can't overbet as often, right? I think that's interesting. It actually wants the smaller bets here. It wants the really small bet a good amount, right? Is this third pot? This is half pot. So it wants half pot about a quarter of the time. This overbet, this like pot and a half, or is that, yeah, that's pot and a half or so. Maybe it's 180. Anyway, this overbet, the large overbet, is only like 9% of the time. So what's going on? Why can't we bet as often? Well, I think it's because at this point the stack to pot ratio is significantly larger than it was in the other sim, right? So now the stack to pot ratio is still well over 10-1. So like the closer you are to getting all in, the smaller the stack to pot ratio, I think you get to be more aggressive in certain spots, even out of position, right? You can take that equity edge and like really lean on people a lot. Whereas here, we're going to have to worry about how are we going to play the river? How are we going to realize? So 6-5 of diamonds, though, it still does want to use, now it actually wants this like around pot size. So that's a little different, right? So that's basically what I did, except it was in a different scenario because I bet larger on the flop. Again, they're folding like half their range for this, right? And they're raising almost never. Basically, if they spike a set, they're like, maybe I'll raise, but only if I'm unblocking 7x of diamonds. So we'll say that they call, and then the river's a 4. And if we go back to 6-5, it's still like, no, this isn't a hand to do this with. If you look at the other 6-5s, it wants to check only 13-14% of the time. So if I somehow get here with 6-5 of spades or 6-5 of hearts, which I really probably shouldn't, but if somehow I decided I was going to bet the turn, then yeah, bet the river, right? About pot size, a little bit over pot. So that's a thing to do. But what that tells me is that the problem with the 6-5 of diamonds is that it's blocking diamonds, right? Which is a lot of the folding range. And you don't want to block the folding range when you're bluffing, right? You want to block value, don't block folds. And depending on, it's like with call downs, block value, don't block bluffs. And if you block both, that's generally worse for you. I guess it depends on the bet sizes, if it's an overbet or regular or whatever. But yeah, in general, blocking the hands that you really want them to have can be just catastrophic. So you really want to avoid that. I'm going to go back and just double check one thing for peace of mind. Bet, call, 7. And then this is, yeah, that's not pot and a half. I think I was calling this pot and a half. I think that was bet 180, right? Yeah, so that was almost 2x pot. So that bet that it really liked on the turn in this line, where it really wanted me to 2x pot with a 6-5 of diamonds. So the key here, I think, in terms of like self-improvement, right? In terms of extracting value out of this, let's go back to the hand. Bet large on the flop because I have a nuttiness advantage. Good, right? This is correct. this is the way to go. Whether we do this with range, whether we have 2 bet sizings, or we do this with like 80% of our range with this bet sizing and then we check a little bit, that's kind of, you know, dealer's choice. But here, this is the right thought process. On the turn, thinking I still have a big nuttiness advantage and I have good equity because I can bank a flush, or I could catch a bluffing card like a king or a 9 or an 8 or an ace or something, and maybe I want to bluff those cards. That was the right thought process. And I did a little over pot. I could go even bigger here. This is where I can go, okay, now I'm going to go like 2x pot, right? And blocking diamonds here is kind of good because now I'm blocking continues, right? Blocking jack 5 of diamonds. I don't want them to have jack 5 of diamonds. I want them to fold, right? I want them to have jack 5 of spades. So I can go bigger here. I can put more pressure here. But then now on the river, the logic changes and it's like, well, I don't want to block a diamond, right? Because that's what I'm targeting. That's what I want them to fold. And I do want to, I just want to give up. I want to give up because I'm blocking hands that I'm trying to get to fold. I'm not blocking hands that I don't want them to have. And this just isn't the combo to use here. So the old school thinking of bluff the bottom of your range on the river just isn't always correct. And this is a spot where PO solver is like, yeah, no, that's so 2010. Thanks for sticking with me. Hit like and subscribe. Hit me in the comments if you have a question or you would have played something differently, or if you have thoughts about how exploitatively maybe you'd want to deviate from what this sim says. All right, have a great day. Pieces.